Oh, thanks for the kind intro. Well, okay, so I've got a lot to talk about in a very short amount of time, and let's just get started. Anyone here? How many of you are familiar with Lean Startup? If you can just show your hands. Okay. Oh, good, many of you. Great. Well, what I'm hoping to do is really get into some of the depths of it. So not just the surface level stuff, but just show you what we've been doing with my company. I run a company called Industrial Logic, where we've kind of become, over time, a small global company. So we actually have people all over the world now helping companies, adopt lean and agile concepts and principles. And we ourselves make a software product, an e-learning software product that we use to help teach people things like test-driven development and other practices. And in creating that software, we actually tried to practice what we preach. We try to learn constantly, and so we apply a lot of these concepts to our product development. So it keeps us honest, and it certainly keeps us learning and falling on our face and getting back up. So I'm going to show you some of the things that we've learned along the way. If you're interested in the Lean Startup movement on Twitter, that hashtag will get you a load of stuff. It's very active, so check it out. For me, Lean Startup is basically a very nice packaging of a lot of important stuff. There's really, I would say, some things about it that are newish, kind of new, but there are other things that it just stands on the shoulders of others. Okay, so it really came out of Eric Ries's failures. And one thing I love about the Lean Startup movement is the people who are the core leaders of it are very, very upfront about their failures. They've had lots of failures, and a lot of those failures have finally led them to find better ways. It's not a silver bullet, of course, it's not. I know people who are doing Lean Startup where the businesses have failed. They failed often for complex reasons, things they couldn't see, even though they were doing all these experiments and all these pivots and all this A/B testing. It still failed. So it is not a silver bullet. However, I think it can help you fail less, and I actually have found it to be helping us be much more successful. So I'm just a fanboy of things, and I'm going to show you tools that I like. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm just going to show you stuff that I find useful. So Lean Startup was funded. The company that Eric Ries started years ago called InView, this sort of 3D animated world, which I've never experienced. I really should try it sometime. But it was partially funded by a guy named Steve Blank, who's the co-author of this book up here, The Startup Owner's Manual. Anyone here know about that book? The Startup Owner's Manual? It's a very, very, very good book. It's very thick. It's very dense. If you're going to read one book this year, check that one out. It's really, really good. So that defines the customer development approach. And if you take product development and put it alongside of it customer development, you've really got something powerful. We've always had product development and software development. And that critical piece of customer development just hasn't been there, which is really trying to understand what the heck does this customer need and want, and what are they going to really use, and what are they going to pay for. So he's introduced an absolutely critical thing to our work. And Eric Ries basically adopted those ideas, studied them when Steve was teaching at Berkeley and Stanford, and applied them to his own startup with great success. So customer development is a core part of the Lean Startup. Eric used extreme programming at InView and is a big fan of extreme programming, so that of course was blended into their process at InView. And certainly he was influenced by the Poppendick's and their lean development books. And a very peripheral part of Lean Startup is, they actually used a Kanban board there, so Kanban was a little piece of Lean Startup. All right, so let's dive deeper. Mitch Kapoor, the guy that created Lotus 1, 2, 3, had that to say about the book. Roy Bahat, president of a huge gaming company, IGN Entertainment, said it's for organizations of all sizes. Now this is controversial. There are some people in Lean Startup world who say this is really just for small startups. Don't pollute it by trying to bring it into big corporations. It's just not going to work. Corporations can't handle this. They're big. They're bulky. They can't move quickly. They can't pivot. So this is a little controversial. But here's a company called Intuit, which is in the Fortune 100 or Fortune 50, I think, centerpiece of how teams work in my company. It is an absolute core part of how Intuit runs. Okay, so there's an example of a giant company that has done it. That said, Intuit has always been an extremely entrepreneurial company. So this is in their ballpark. All right, not many other corporations we work with are really as entrepreneurial as an Intuit. So it's still not necessarily true that a big organization can adopt lean startup. What is it? This was my kind of definition that I threw together based on lots of my studies and reading. A disciplined, scientific, and capital efficient. You'll hear me use that term a lot, capital efficient, because we waste a ton of time and money all the time in the work we do. So to me, capital efficiency is really important, and the way you become capital efficient is by being scientific and being really disciplined about it. So it's this disciplined, scientific, and capital efficient method for discovering and building products that services that people love. That's the goal. Okay, let's tell a story. NeedFeed. Never heard of them, right? You never heard of NeedFeed? It's a startup. There's hundreds and hundreds of startups, especially where I live in Silicon Valley. NeedFeed had a clever idea. They said, people buy things on the internet, and there's this social media. So why don't we kind of bring the two together? When I'm buying something expensive, I kind of want to ask my social network, hey, I'm buying a camera. You've bought cameras. What did you buy? It just made sense. It made sense not only for this company, but for 2 other companies in Silicon Valley. So 3 companies got funded for this concept of bringing buying and social together. One of those companies, NeedFeed, was a lean startup. So they followed the lean startup approach. They said, if we're a lean startup, the first thing we're going to try to do is invalidate our idea. We just got millions of dollars of investment capital for this idea. Now let's try to invalidate it. How can we do that? They went on to rentacoder.com. It's the first thing they did, rentacoder.com, and they paid a guy $40 US to write a Grease Monkey script. The Grease Monkey script basically changed Facebook. It changed Facebook to pretend to find your friends and put fake news items into your news feed. It looked like this. So you'd come in to Facebook, log in, right? It would just have to be on one computer because that was where the Grease Monkey script was running. It didn't change all of Facebook. Grease Monkey can just change one browser at a time. Okay, so you come in, you log in, and it's finding your friends and putting fake news items about what they bought into your news feed. They had 50 people come into their office. They paid them $20 a piece. 50 people walked in. They said, "What's your favorite social media network?" They all said Facebook. They said, "Fine, log into Facebook and tell us, what do you think of Facebook?" And they'd log in, they'd see these fake news items, and they'd say, I used to love Facebook. It was, my friends were sharing poetry and pictures. Now I see all this commerce stuff. I mean, Facebook's going to hell. I don't like this at all. So 47 out of 50 people hated what they did here. But they spent almost nothing to actually do this experiment. To invalidate their idea, they spent almost nothing. So they went back to their venture capitalists and they said, look, we have good news and bad news. The good news is we invalidated the idea you funded us for, so we didn't waste your money. The bad news is, we have to basically now start looking for the next pivot, the next hypothesis, and start testing that. So do you want to continue to work with us or not? And they said yes. So they kept going and they kept pivoting until they found something that would actually work. That statistically and through all of the surveys and all of the work they did with real people, they said, this has traction. And then they started hiring and started moving quickly. I love this story because of the capital efficiency of their invalidated work. Invalidating the ideas so efficiently, so capital efficiently. All right, so in a startup, no facts exist inside the building, only opinions. This has to be a core fundamental idea in your heart, that you keep thinking, we have opinions here, we have no facts. Because every time you have that giant backlog of prioritized items, it really is just a list of guesses most of the time. It's a bunch of guesses. So don't think you have any facts. Get outside of the building is the rallying cry of Steve Blank. So take that now with what Lean talks about, which is trying to see waste and basically systematically eliminate it. This is what Toyota did, to see it and eliminate it, okay? Waste is everywhere. we learned how to deal with some wasted product feature ideas. Let's say you have a product and you want to build a new feature. You could build the feature and spend a whole bunch of time and then find out that no one uses it. Or you could do one of many techniques. This one's called a feature fake. I learned this from Laura Klein. She's a lean UX expert. So what we did was this. We said, we have an opinion, we have a guess that people are going to want to do online chatting in our e-learning system. So when they're on a page together, they could all join a chat. Instead of just talking through our message threads, they could just have a live chat. Wow, it's an interesting idea, but it's just an idea, it's a guess. So let's put a feature fake up. On every single page, we put this message, 16 users from 4 countries are online right now, join the chat. It was completely fake. We hacked it into the HTML, shoved it up there with continuous deployment, and it was live. And we said, we're going to have 100 people see it, and then we're just going to take it down. So 100 people saw it, 22 of them clicked on join the chat. Out of those, we gave them a little survey. The survey said, the new group chat feature may be available soon. How likely would you be to use it? Unlikely, neutral, or likely? And these were the numbers we got. So ultimately, there were 6 people out of 100 who ultimately said they would use this feature. Based on that information, we said, let's not do this. It's not really compelling data, okay? Now, since that time, we've said, we probably should have had more than 100 because the 100's kind of small for our sample size. We should have gone to 1,000. That might have been a little bit better. In addition, we didn't A/B test this. We didn't have 2 different messages. It could have said 16 people from your country are online right now and see what the differences are. We didn't do that either. So there's some ways we could have improved that. The other thing you may be thinking is, my God, if they use this all the time, they're going to really annoy their users, right? How many of you are thinking that? Many of you. Me too. When she first told me about this, I was like, oh, no, that's going to be bad. No. Basically, you only use this when you need to. You use it occasionally. It's one of many tools in your tool chest. And you put it up there very quickly and take it down. So it's not going to bother people for a long time. It's just user research. It's done quickly and easily. So that's a feature fake. Feature fake saved us a whole bunch of time, right? Eliminating waste, systematically eliminating waste, like Toyota. That's what it did. Now, Agile, I'm going to trash Agile a little bit in this talk, so just get used to that. But Agile basically has this concept of, the work was accepted by some sort of authority, the product owner or the customer in XP. It was accepted. And so if you're a developer, you want to get the work accepted, because if it's accepted, it's like, oh, it's wonderful. I got my points. I can move on. I'm a rock star. Accepted means nothing. No one's seeing it. You've accepted that you built someone's guess. That's basically what you did. Someone's guess about something that's important. No users have really validated anything. So in Lean Startup, what they started to do was have a validated column, okay? And this is hard to do. In fact, the interesting thing is I've been hanging out with people who worked at IMBU, so I'm getting more of the inside story lately. And they didn't do this all the time because this is hard. This is hard to do. But ultimately it means that you validated that the work you did was actually used by people, that they liked it, that it brought the experience you were looking for them to have into the product, right? That's when you're really finished, because you validated that it actually did something, not that you finished it and someone liked it inside your company. Remember, there are no facts inside the building. We did this. We did this with a resume feature in our e-learning. We basically said, in fact, we say this now, for any feature we build from now on, we will have usage metrics. So we will know if people are using it or not. So when you log into our e-learning, there's a simple little resume button that shows what album you were on, and it'll take you right to where you were. Not a big deal. We knew that we had to build this because more than 3 or 4 clients all wanted it. So it was like, fine, there's evidence, we'll build it. We didn't fake it. We knew we needed to build it, but we wanted to measure. So the measurement said, 32% of people were actually using it at that time. That has grown and grown and grown. I've looked at it later, it was like 44% recently. All right, that's a pretty good statistic. I know that people are using my resume feature. I want this for all my features. I want to have percentages of usage for every single feature I do. So I could even say, rate us as an organization for all the features we put out. What's the average percentage of usage on our features? What if we did that for all product owners? Some of them wouldn't do too well, I think. Validated learning. learning validated via data, surveys, and interviews, or demonstrated by positive improvements in the startup's core metrics. Right? You have some core metrics that you're shooting towards. Again, that's, there's a vision, and it's typically guided by what you're building, some mission. You're trying to achieve something. You have some metrics behind all that. We'll get to that, what those look like in a minute, but you need to be doing experiments to ultimately get closer and closer towards those goals. So you're validating that, all right? Now, Eric Ries himself struggled with Agile. He tried Agile, and he basically found that Agile led him to create fairly well-crafted software that no one wanted to use, right? As Jez said before. Now, I think, his implementation of Agile was a little naive because I would never have built 11, IM networks. He built all the software to connect to 11 different IM networks, instant messaging networks. That's a lot. Normally I'd say, well, you just do 1 or 2 and test it. Even in Agile, it's not like Agile has no concept of being, doing something minimalistic and trying it. It's just that Lean Startup goes a lot further. So I thought, this was, when I first read this in his book, I said, you're kind of missed what Agile was. And he said, well, tell me where it said, in any of the Agile literature, tell me where it said only build 1 IM network. Now, I've been doing this stuff since the late 90s, and we know to do that, right? But it's hard to find somewhere it says that. It is actually hard to find it. So it was too implicit in the Agile literature, this concept of, do one little thing and test. People just built whatever they want, guessing that people would want to use it. They were wrong. We had something fairly embarrassing happen to us. We basically had a gigantic sale of our e-learning to one of our biggest customers. We were really happy. It was particularly timely because it was during the recession. So we were just sitting pretty in the recession. And we prided ourselves on giving incredibly good customer service. Like, on our e-learning system, you can ask a question and we would immediately reply. We had a few people internally at that company that wanted changes to some content occasionally. We'd make it immediately. Incredibly good customer service. But we weren't doing something now I think of it now as completely basic. We weren't looking at their usage. They were buying box sets of albums for students, and gosh, almost 80% of those albums were never touched. The green are the ones that were finished, and the 15% are ones that were started, albums that were started but not finished. That's shelfware. That's shelfware. I never want to be in the business of selling shelfware, but we were not paying sufficient attention to usage. Okay, we needed to improve. So when I started reading Lean Startup stuff around 2008 or 9, I was like, this is really talking about this important thing that we were missing here. So what Eric says is that a startup is a human institution designed to create a new product or service under conditions of extreme uncertainty. Now, we were extreme programmers. We interpreted this, we didn't think about this. Our version of it was this. So it was not true that it was under conditions of extreme programming. That's a great joke that just completely fell flat, so I will not use that one again. Happiness. We've learned that we have to focus on ecosystem happiness, not just users. What if someone in a giant corporation buys our e-learning and it turns out to be shelfware? They're the buyer. They're never going to ever use our software. No matter how good we make the user experience, they're not going to use it. We got to make them happy too. We got to make a whole bunch of people happy in the ecosystem. So the basic formula we do now all the time is this hypothesis experimentation loop with this mad scientist doing the A/B testing and all kinds of crazy experiments as fast as possible. And if we somehow manage to get past all that to something that we prove should be built, then we'll plan it the Agile way, build it the Agile way, and hopefully measure for more happiness. Now, I don't want to be like this zealot, like this is the only way we work now. That's not true. We'll have a client say, I'd like one more column on this report, please put that there. We say, fine, we'll just do it. I mean, there's nothing to talk about. There's no experimentation to do. So you don't have to go crazy with this stuff. You don't use it for everything. We do continuous deployment. It was one of the first things we brought in as one of our practices of Lean Startup. It must be about 3 years now that we're doing this, and we absolutely love it. So it really, Lean Startup, one of the first things I learned about Lean Startup was continuous deployment. Kent Beck sent me an email saying, you got to go see this video about continuous deployment. And it was just phenomenal. They were deploying 50 times a day at IMView with incredible abilities to roll back and do all this stuff. That was my first inclination that Lean Startup had basically taken the knob of Agile and turned it up to 11. It was just startling that we'd been doing CI, continuous integration, for so many years and hadn't really moved to CD, continuous deployment, or continuous delivery, as Jez calls it. So we started looking at a lot of things to deal with our low usage rates, at least at that big giant client. We started to categorize our users. There were the non-starters, people that never even signed our EULA. It's like, great, your company bought you something and you don't even bother to even look at it. The skimmers, the people who just skim a little bit. The dabblers, they would dabble in like maybe one album, but never really go further. The connectors, the people that actually were doing the content and connecting with others through our message boards. And then the finishers. And you start to sort of observe the data of these different kinds of users to try to figure out what's going on. How do we get all these folks down the funnel? We looked at our response time to questions. We always said we had great customer service, great responsiveness, but we weren't statistical about it. We didn't look at data, right? It was just a feeling. And it was mostly right. We promised 48-hour delivery to questions. 5 hours for the refactoring was average. 6 hours for code smells. 50 hours for microtesting. Wow, the average is 50 hours for microtesting, 50 hours to respond to a student's question? Interesting. One of the big shifts that happened to us as we moved from Agile to Lean Startup was we started looking at lots of statistics, lots of data. This whole presentation's filled with that stuff because that's in our nature now. We're constantly looking at numbers. Big difference from Agile. We would analyze page views. We would look at what happened during the launch of the e-learning with a new client. What happened during training? What happened when we did a webinar? And the second webinar and onwards. What happens here? What happens when we do mail campaigns and send stuff out to the students? Studying all the data. Usage improvements have been there. We've seen them steadily climb. For every one of our clients, we've been tracking it closely, looking at the improvements of our completion rates, started rates, and trying to drop the not started rates. This is one customer. They've rolled this out globally, and they're up to 61%. And actually, that's an old number. The slide needs a little updating, but it's getting a lot better because of all these experiments that we're trying with our customers. So Sean Ellis said basically this. In an early stage startup, success is not in a to-do list, it's in a to-learn list. What do we need to learn? And I think it's not just early stage startups. I think this applies to a lot of the projects we do. A lot of the work we do, it's actually what do we need to learn and how can we do it as rapidly as possible, not the giant backlog. And enter in one of these wonderful new tools, okay? There's all kinds of tools out there for planning Agile projects. There's all kinds of ones, right? This is a tool which comes straight out of the Lean Startup world. I really like it. It's refreshingly different. It's called Lean Launch Lab. Okay, Lean Launch Lab. And it basically has a little very simplistic, I'll just jump to this. It's kind of a simple Kanban, right? You've got your to-do, you're in progress, and you're done. But everything you enter in is all about hypotheses and tracking them. So the to-do must contain, your hypothesis, what experiments you want to prove or disprove, any metrics associated with that, and some tasks you need to do, right? It's very hyper-focused that this is a hypothesis. As Steve Blank says, he uses the term hypothesis at Stanford and at Berkeley when he teaches, because people have paid a lot of money to come to those institutions, and he needs to use big words like hypothesis. When he's not there, he uses the normal word, which is guess. So essentially, this is a guess. Enter your guess. Isn't that lovely? Enter your guess, because this is just a guess. It's not really, there's no solid evidence, for the most part, right? Our resume feature, we had enough evidence that people wanted it. It wasn't necessarily a difficult guess. It was something that we're pretty sure they'd use. But for the most part, there are lots of things that we have no idea about, and they need to treat them as such. So it not only walks you through this process, it also helps you deal with the lean canvas. We'll get to that in a minute, but this tool made it super, super simple to fill out that lean canvas. It just walked you through it question at a time. In the customer development process, you're really trying to move from customer discovery to customer validation, and then onwards into the growth of your business, building the actual, really building the business. So if you get past this line right here, you know, you've got your product market fit, that golden phrase. And if you say, if you have to ask, are we there yet? Have we achieved product market fit? You haven't. You'll know it when you achieve it. Going from customer discovery to customer validation is painful, and it often doesn't work. You have to go right back to customer discovery through the pivot concept. And I'll explain what pivot means in a moment. But this is basically the search for a business. You're searching for a business here. You really don't know what to build. Think of NeedFeed. NeedFeed tried something that completely invalidated it. They had to then search for the actual business. So a pivot is a special kind of change designed to test a new fundamental guess about the product, business model, or engine of growth. You're basically constantly focused on what product am I building, what are the metrics around it, what's my engine of growth, and how can I test that? How can I really optimize it? So this is the famous New Yorker cartoon. And a catalog of pivots, a zoom in pivot. What's a zoom in pivot? Say you have your new feature, your new startup product has 20 features in it. Turns out your customers really only like 3 of the features. Jettison all the others and zoom into those 3 and make that your product. Build on that. Zoom in. Zoom out's the opposite. They're using 3, but they don't like it. They need more. They need more stuff. They're not going to really go whole hog if they don't have more. Zoom out. Customer segment pivot. There's a chain of, well, let me start it this way. There was a husband and wife that ran a little antique store, right? Antique furniture. And it was a mom and pop, literally, store with antiques. People would come and buy. But the wife decided one day to start making some sandwiches to feed people because, you know, they'd be in there for a while and they're hungry. So she made these roast beef sandwiches. People loved them. In fact, they started lining up out the door to get the roast beef sandwiches. Finally, they realized one day, you know, maybe we should just sell the roast beef sandwiches and get rid of all the antiques. Now they have a whole chain of restaurants all across the United States for their roast beef sandwiches. So that's a customer segment pivot. We've changed who our customer is. Customer need pivot is, you know, basically, actually, you know what, I might have gotten that wrong. The customer need pivot was one I just described, sorry. The customer segment pivot is, you're just going from a different segment. I might go from my consumers to a business, you know, B2B, B2C to B2B or something like that. Platform pivot, you've just completely changed platforms. You know, IMVU did a very, very critical platform pivot. They moved from one technology to another, and it made a huge difference in their bottom line. It made an absolute huge difference in their engine of growth. Phenomenal. So I won't get too deep into Vodazin. Jez talked about that if you were in the last talk, but Vodazin is a startup in San Francisco that basically went through all kinds of pivoting to arrive at something that was scalable and you know, basically an MVP. An MVP that got to product market fit and is now trying to grow. So the interesting thing is the kinds of pivots they did. They started out with their initial product, which took about 8 months to build. They found it failed miserably. They zoomed in, did a zoom in pivot, which then took about 4 months, and that also failed. Then they said, you know what, we're going to switch to corporations. Forget people, you know, just working with individuals. That's not working. Let's go to corporations. They got some excellent evidence that corporations were going to pay a lot of money to use their software. Turned out wasn't right, but they'd only spent about 2 months on that. So finally, they did a platform pivot, and that was their 4th MVP, minimum viable product. It was actually a success. They started to see the kinds of numbers that they were expecting to see. Okay, this is the big deal here. It's not MVP. MVP is a simple concept to some extent. Minimum viable product, everyone talks about MVP. They pick up the MVP concept and they run with it. They forget one critical thing. you can't really do well with MVP if you don't do innovation accounting. Innovation accounting is where you're accounting for, is my MVP any good? What metrics are telling me that my minimum viable product is actually good? So Vodafone did a marvelous job of tracking their numbers, of doing innovation accounting, right? So basically, they saw some evidence in Pivot 4 that they were really moving in the right direction, okay? All right. So the pirate metrics, our metrics, are the activation, basically users coming to your product or to your site. Activation, they're starting to actually use the product or site. Retention, they keep coming back. They don't just use it once, they keep coming back. Referral, often called the Net Promoter Score, right? You ask people, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would, likely would it be for you to tell friends and family about this? And you should be getting numbers up there, in the 8s and 9s and so forth. That's referral. And then revenue. Are you actually getting revenue out of all this? So that's pirate metrics. Very nice way to, measure whether you're getting where you want to be. Okay? It's just one set of metrics. There's all kinds of others you could be looking at. But this is a popular set. Intuit has their own. Intuit, they call them the love metrics. Delivered customer benefit. Have we delivered customer benefit? Are our customers actively using it, right? And also, are they telling others about it? So that is how Intuit grades themselves. They also follow the 2 pizza team rule. The teams are no bigger than you can feed with 2 pizzas. So that's, I was just actually in Italy and I showed this to them and they're like, that doesn't look like great Italian pizza. I was like, you're right, it's American, some trashy American. We've reached out to the monkeys for help in becoming more and more lean and in adopting lean startup. Who are the monkeys? The monkeys are MailChimp, SurveyMonkey, and a company called Angry Monkeys. And I'll show you what we've done. So first of all, split or A/B testing is a very common thing that's done in lean startup. You try 2 different versions of something, usually at the same time, and get data on them to see which one's better. Some of my friends call it champion and contender, like a boxing match. You have the champion, and then there's a new contender that comes along, and you see if that contender can win. So you might put a little bit of traffic towards the contender while the champion's getting most of the traffic. That's one way. There's a variety of ways to do A/B testing. But it is a wonderful way to rapidly get some data. Intuit basically said, we stopped arguing with each other. It used to be that you'd show up to a boardroom, everyone would have their beautiful PowerPoint slides, and the best speaker with the best PowerPoint slides would win the argument. Now, they just put a whole bunch of experiments into the product and collect real data, and then make decisions on real data. And there's very little fighting now. It's a wonderful change. We tried this. We started sending emails to our customers, our e-learning customers. We'd say, let's see what happens if we treat one set of people as VIPs, very important persons, and the other is just regular people. Sent the exact same email except for one difference in the one paragraph difference. The paragraph difference was, hey, by the way, I'm going to be your personal VIP for your e-learning, and I'm going to help you each and every week to make sure you get through stuff. Isn't that great? Let's get started. Send me an email. Here's my email address. Just to see what would happen, to track the opens and the click-throughs and all that other stuff. We never used to do this before. We actually used to just send emails via our email program, and we didn't track anything. We didn't track open rates. We didn't track click rates, right? As I said, we've become more and more and more statistical. This was fascinating because we had crappy open and click rates. Look at this, 4, 2, 3 opens, 1. This led us to call the guy that bought the stuff from us, the buyer, and say, what's happening here? We sent this out to like 50 people and barely anyone opened it. Oh, we're doing a release right now. It's a giant release that's going out. I'm like, okay, why did you buy this now and roll this out now during your release? But I didn't say that. I was just like, it was a mental note. It's like, oh, I'm learning more about my customer. They're crazy. So this was very interesting because we did get some very interesting exchanges. One guy in particular sent a nice email to us. These courses are a huge help for me. I switched into coding from audio production, so anything that covers gaps in my knowledge is great. And we tracked this guy. He was going through every single album, doing every exercise, uploading things, getting stuff. He was awesome. So he sent this email, and at first I just thought, oh, this is nice. Let me forward this on to the team. But then I stopped in my tracks. I was like, wait a second. He's brand new to programming, and I had no idea of that. There's nothing that I'm capturing about him that says that would tell me he's brand new to programming. I don't capture that data. In fact, I don't capture whether you're male or female when you enter my system. I couldn't tell the difference there. I don't know so much about my own customers because we've been we've been too lean in some sense. And now we're learning to be a little less lean, a little more, let's gather as much data and learn as much about our customers. So this was a little bit of a mind shift for me. We started after this collecting lots and lots more data about our customers. So one of the things we started collecting was usability data. We said, one thing we do know is that people struggle with our navigation a little bit. And lean UX people say you got to constantly be doing lean UX testing, constant testing of your UI to see if it's actually working well. So I said, let's make a little survey here. I said, where would you click to go to page 8? You're on this page of our e-learning. And all I did was take a little snapshot of a photo, a snapshot of a page, threw it on the click test, right? It's made by the Angry Monkeys. It's called the click test. And you can just put a question and put an image. So our question was, where would you click if you wanted to go to page 8? There's a little information display here called, which says you're on page 4, it's just for information display. And you're supposed to actually click over here to get there the fastest, because that's the next track button and it actually brings up it's complicated, but here's what they did. Most of them clicked on this next page button, which they'd have to click 4 times to get there. That's the wrong button. Statistically, 88% clicked in the wrong area. I said, fine. You know what? I'm going to do another experiment. That took like 10 minutes. How about, I said, the question was no good. Page 4 to page 8. How about you're on page 20 and you want to go to page 40? That's a big jump. I put a new test up there. By the way, do you notice anything different? Yeah? Well, I took some buttons. How do you think I took the buttons away, by the way? Photoshop, correct. Photoshop. I simply just erased them. In fact, there's a little trace of one right there as part of the button. And I put the word contents there to make it really clear. If you want to jump 20 pages, just click on the contents link and you'll go there. Made sense? See what they did. 82% clicked in the wrong area. Now, this was interesting because I had no idea that they would actually be clicking on this. It's an information display about where you are. Okay, I know what's wrong. Same sort of question. This time I made it huge orange. It's just, I'm in paint shop. Why not just make it? It's like I could have made it flashing, but I didn't go that far. And sure enough, it was same thing. So I said, fine. I've seen enough. Another question, and I just look how ugly this looks. I mean, I'm not a graphic artist, but it's one of those things, and we got the numbers right. So that was 77%. Now, ironically, you might look at this and go, okay, so then they implemented that, right? No, we didn't implement that. You know why? Because the previous design, before we had those 4 buttons, was this. See it? There it is. We already did this. We did this a long time ago. It was also not good. Not good. It didn't work well. People were confused by it all the time. They didn't know what to do. So we know that doesn't work either. So I said, fine. I'm going to Laura Klein, our lean UX expert. Let her do some magic. Let her do some testing. And she basically went into her balsamic, started making some sketches, went to a cafe in Silicon Valley, started talking and having programmers go through it, and came up with this. And this is the new design, which she has said tested extremely well when she went through. She had various screens. This is just one of many screens, but this is the new design that we will be implementing. So again, all I'm trying to show you is lots of experimentation to find out where we really need to go at all levels of the product. Okay, that's that. Concurrent set-based design. Anyone know about that from Lean? Concurrent set-based design. It's not something I see so much in Lean Startup, but it's certainly one of the Lean concepts that we apply a lot. So there might be 3 different versions. You might have Kim, Bob, and Jim all doing something at the exact same time, the same exact thing. They're all doing the same, trying to accomplish the same task. And at the end, you say, you know what, we really liked this part of Kim's work, and this is great about Bob here, and these things from Jim are great. Let's bring all that together in our solution. It's wonderful stuff. We did this on our website. We did 99designs.com. Everyone ever hear of that? It's basically you launch a contest. We launched a contest for the homepage of Industrial Logic. And basically said, you know, here's what we want, here are sites we like, here's stuff we don't want, and so forth. You give some background for what you're looking for, and all of a sudden you have a contest. And we had about 22 designers worldwide join the contest. And we had over 60 entries. And they went through a series of you know, qualification rounds all the way up to the finalists, like a real contest. All of a sudden, we ended up with a. Did this just die?
Yeah.
Okay, so all of a sudden we ended up with a ton of great designs that we could choose from. And we liked, for example, this guy had a great header. We loved the header that he did. Someone else had a very nice footer that we liked. I forget where it was. This guy had a great map down here that we thought was excellent. So we took all these different pieces and put them together in our final design. But there were many entries, and it was so inexpensive, it was unbelievable. So it's another example of, you know, capital efficient work, because it cost nothing and it happened in like a week. We had all this done. That was the final design. Heat, click, and scroll mapping. We love this as well. If you're doing stuff on the web, you can test in all kinds of wonderful ways. So we are experimenting with selling a new album, right? This album does not exist. It's called Test Driving Embedded C. It's going to be an album version of a book that James Grenning wrote. Okay, it'll be a multimedia album. But we don't want to build it. We don't want to spend any money on it. We don't want to do anything until we validate that there's enough interest in it. So we made this landing page. It's just a landing page. The product doesn't exist. You can buy it. You can pre-order it now at half price. And then let's get some analytics going here. Let's get some mapping happening. So we can see where people are clicking through Crazy Ed. Shows us where they happen to be clicking. Notice there aren't too many clicks here. We can see who are returning users or new users and where they click. We can see where they're scrolling, right? Where are they scrolling? Because it's a fairly long page. We can see, do they scroll to the bottom of the page or not? It turns out in this one, they mostly stay in that first section. They don't scroll down too much. So anyway, I've just shown you a whole bunch of different tools that we use, and they're not that hard to find, but all of these tools are helping us to measure, are we actually building the right thing? Are we building something that, or should we build it, first of all? And if we did build it, how can we refine it to make it better and better and better? So, to summarize, Agile versus Lean Startup. On some areas, we build upon what Agile has. We just build upon it. You cannot do continuous deployment without continuous integration. So you're building upon it. In other areas, it's just a substitution. Product roadmaps are tricky if everything's a guess. If you have too many guesses, your time spent building a product roadmap is probably a lot of waste. So think about maybe just focusing on looking at what's called the business model canvas. I didn't have time to get deeply into that, but it looks at the bigger picture of what you're trying to achieve with your MVP. Product vision. I think you still need a product vision, and you'll build on that. You have to build on the vision, but you want to see, am I getting to that vision? Is that vision even realistic? By seeing, can I get to product market fit? Because if you can't get to product market fit, your vision's wrong. Something's off. Release planning. Release planning, I still use it. I still love it. But I'm mostly focusing on creating that minimum viable product. So I'm not going to spend much time doing release planning unless it's targeted at the MVP. Sprints. You can still work in sprints, no problem at all. But really, the main focus for us is learn, measure, build. What do I need to learn? What hypothesis do I have? How am I going to measure whether it's successful or not? And then let me build it and see if I can, get the results I want. So this is the cycle we're focused on the most. We don't even really do fixed length sprints. We haven't done them since 2007. So you could either build on this or not. On-site customer. On-site customer is a great idea, but in Lean Startup, it's get out of the building, right? It's that there are no facts in the building, you've got to get out, right? This is where Toyota sends a guy to California to live with a family for 2 weeks and go in their vehicle for all 2 weeks. So this Toyota engineer is living and breathing with a family. He's very far outside of Japan, outside of the building, but inside of a car, but learning about the customer. User stories, well, yes, but that's still kind of thinking that we know what we're building versus hypotheses or guesses. Backlogs, my God, there's going to be so much waste in the backlog grooming and the backlog estimation and all this work. I really don't like this too much. I'd much rather have a to-learn list that's short. Here's what I want to learn now. Customer feedback. It's wonderful. We love customer feedback. We love to get that feedback. But we're ultimately focused on validating actual metrics. Okay? Seeing if we're getting the kinds of things we're looking for, the kinds of data we want to see. Acceptance tests are wonderful. We still build upon them. But the split testing is something that we find is even more valuable right now. So, just seeing if we're, which way to go on features or whether to build them at all. Continuous integration, we build on it with continuous deployment. Velocity, burn down, etc. All this junk. My God, I can't stand it. I'm writing a blog about this. It's coming out soon. But AARRR, the R metrics or pirate metrics, are wonderful for having some innovation accounting. Agile versus lean startup here to finalize. We have retrospectives, still very important, I think. I mean, you have to do this in such a way that it's having meaningful results. If it's not, then it is waste. The 5 whys in lean, which is something lean startup uses as well, very wonderful for getting to the root cause of problems, really getting into the root cause. And that's where, remember I said it was a scientific, disciplined, capital efficient method? There's a lot of discipline in doing this regularly. Having problems and doing the 5 whys. You can read about this in any of the, read Eric Ries's book, you'll learn about it. Velocity tracking, it's really just a big, I think it's a waste of time. Innovation accounting is really where it's at. You're focused on, am I getting the kinds of core changes, the things I want to see users doing my product, is that there or not? And unfortunately, I could say Agile, to me has been led by some consultants, whereas I see lean startup being led by successful entrepreneurs. I mean, there's a huge difference in business acumen of people in the lean startup world to, I'm an Agile consultant. I'm in this space here, right? I'd rather be on this one. But, I have to respect these guys who have gone through these kinds of, Steve Blank in his bio, he says he's cratered a few companies, cratered, a crater? He's cratered a few companies, and he's had tremendous success with a few companies. So they're very honest about the kinds of learnings they've had. And that is mostly my talk. Thanks. I think we have 2 minutes for questions. Yes?
You were talking about zooming out. How do you know when to zoom out?
How do you know when to zoom out is the question. You basically, it's not all data, right? You can't just be looking at data. You have to be talking to people. You have to be showing your product to people. Usually that's the kind of thing where you would get enough people saying, I would use it if it did this or if it did that. And that's your proof right there. You gotta zoom out. You really don't forget. I'm talking a lot about data here and tracking things. But there's the human side too. You've got to be having people using your product and watching them use it. All that human stuff is extremely important too. They're both important. Other questions? Yeah.
Do you think you can get to lean startup without passing through the agile stage?
Can you get to
coming of age?
Can you get to lean startup without passing through the agile stage? I would say absolutely yes, because most people that adopt agile or anything are not very good at it to start out with, right? So might as well start out and not be very good at lean startup than not be very good at agile, right? Because lean startup is focused on why to build it. I think that's a topic that Gabby's going to be talking about. Why build it in the first place, or should you build it in the first place? And learn really fast from that. Agile, you'll cripple yourself with lean startup if you start building a product successfully and you don't use a lot of the agile concepts, especially TDD and refactoring and all those great engineering practices. So, but I still think it's more important to go that direction. Yes, I would say go straight into lean startup. I think we're out of time, so thanks everyone.